Understood. I got lots of sleep. Good afternoon to members of the media and to the people of Bermuda. I have a relatively extensive statement in advance of taking questions from the media. Last Friday, I had the honor of delivering the 2024-25 budget statement on behalf of the government to the House of Assembly and the people of Bermuda. As its title signifies, this budget is about investing in our people and in our future. We can do that thanks to the collective sacrifice of the people and the businesses on our island, which are now beginning to reap the benefits and helping to provide a foundation for us to build a more prosperous future. I was pleased to announce on Friday that we expect to reach a significant milestone for our island and deliver a balanced budget this year for the first time since 2003. In simple terms, this means that the government will not need to borrow any more money and can focus its efforts and resources on continuing to reduce Bermuda's debt and investing in initiatives that improve the lives of Bermudians. This projection and our ability to do this without any new taxes highlights this government's commitment to fiscal responsibility, sound debt management, and preservation and growth of investor confidence, improved economic activity while allowing workers to keep more of their hard-earned money in their pockets. Most importantly, for residents and businesses, this government will achieve a balanced budget without introducing new taxes. This is part of our ongoing effort to make living and doing business in Bermuda more accessible and affordable. This follows from last year's budget pledge that saw no new business pay more taxes and 86% of workers and businesses seeing their tax bill reduce. These measures have allowed the average family in Bermuda to see $10,000 more in their pockets rather than spent on taxes to the government. And some families have seen savings as high as $18,000 since this government has taken office, when combined as the result of the tax cuts over the past 6 years. This again means $18,000 more in the pockets of our hard-working Bermudians who are making $48,000 a year to spend on necessities rather than taxes. This government continues to take a people-centered approach to all that we do. And we recognize that before we took office, the people of Bermuda had to contend with years of austerity, increasing debt, and underinvestment in education, infrastructure, and social programs. We also recognize that events such as wars, supply chain issues, and 40-year high global inflation have increased the cost of living, and therefore the burden on many families. That is why this government's approach has and will remain focused on reducing costs where we can, as we have done before. Over the last few years, the government has taken measures such as eliminating duty on staple goods, reducing the sugar tax, freezing fuel prices, reducing vehicle licensing fees, and reducing the tax burden for workers and businesses. And these actions have helped to reduce the rate of inflation here in Bermuda and will continue to do our part to help residents tackle the escalating costs of living. In this year's budget, we have committed a $30 million allocation to prevent health insurance bills from increasing by freezing the standard premium rate for the third year in a row, saving all policyholders from an increase of $45 a month, which would have equated to an additional $540 a year. If we did not take this action, health insurance premiums for every policyholder in Bermuda would have increased this year, and therefore costs would have increased for individuals and for businesses. This government has continually shown our commitment to reducing the financial burden for Bermudians where we can, and this $540 savings is a real benefit. We will also continue to invest in initiatives that are vital to our community. We've committed an additional $10 million to affordable housing through the Bermuda Housing Corporation, which will help to accelerate our efforts in increasing the affordable housing stock. This further investment is in addition to the $15 million that was already committed, which has resulted in 67 more affordable housing units being brought online. The government has earmarked more funds for education, including new IT equipment for students, education reform projects, infrastructure upgrades for the hospital, and enhancements to the government's IT infrastructure to enable better services to the public. It is a fact that our government has had significant underinvestment in capital projects since 2010. And in the budget statement, I highlighted our need to target the recommended benchmark of 2% of GDP for capital investment to ensure that our infrastructure does not reach this state again for future generations. This again highlights the importance of sound financial policy, prudent management and investment, which this government will continue to exemplify. Looking to last year's budget, this is an important point, the deficit is expected to be just $28 million. $42 million, or 60% below the original estimate of $70 million, and a $38 million reduction compared to the previous year. This is on the back of stronger than expected revenue and strong budget control by the government. This year's deficit target is expected to be $44 million. However, given previous years where spending has been kept at bay, it is likely that that figure will also come in lower. Looking forward to next year's budget, which I presented on Friday, government revenue is expected to reach $1.23 billion, which is 6.6% or $76.8 million above the original estimates for this current fiscal year. Most of this increase comes from projected growth and also with the revision of the new high relief making up the balance. Current account expenditure is forecast at $992 million, and this increase of $19.4 million above this year's figures is largely attributed to union pay agreements, which total $20 million of additional pay, benefits, and overheads. Another important point is that interest expense will fall next year due to our repayment of $50 million of long-term debt this year, reducing the interest bill by $2.4 million. Capital expenditure for fiscal year 24-25 is forecast to be $112.3 million. This is 17% higher than last year, an additional $16 million. This level of capital expenditure will be the largest budgeted capital investment since 2010. We are doubling our investment in roadworks to $5 million and investing in new plants and equipment to ensure that we speed the pace of roadworks. We hear and acknowledge the rightful frustration of the community with the state of our roads. This investment is a sign of our commitment to bring our roads back to a state that the people of Bermuda expect. We also have allocated additional capital funds this year to procure new asphalt plants and related equipment, as well as training and development for our highways personnel. Economic performance continues to show positive trends, especially with growth in international business. 2023 saw 569 new company incorporations for the first 3 quarters, and also a 4.6% increase in jobs, with 215 new jobs being filled in international business. This sector now provides 4,909 jobs, which is the highest number of jobs in international business ever recorded, which surpasses the highest number previously, which was recorded in 2008, before the global financial crisis and the Great Recession. What is also important to note is that since we came to office in 2017, there are 506 more Bermudians working in international business, which is more than ever before. Looking at the broader economy, real GDP growth for 2022 was 6.4%, easily beating the projections of 3%, demonstrating that our recovery is broad-based. Given the continued strong numbers seen in 2023, we are projecting 4% real GDP growth throughout the year of 2023. Also, for 2024, we can look forward to strong construction growth with the Brookfield building on Front Street, which we see the demolition that is already occurring. That project is expected to add 200 jobs to the economy. The Morgan's Point development, which we know spoke about in the budget statement, which the first part is going to get underway, and also the start of the Fairmont Southampton project, which is getting underway, which is a projection of 700 jobs during the construction phase, and once completed will support and improve our tourism sector, which is already seeing a resurgence. When speaking of the resurgence in tourism, 2023 showed significant recovery, with both leisure and air cruise arrivals seeing substantial increases from the previous year. Visitor spending rose sharply, with air and cruise tourists spending more in 2022, and also cruise visitor numbers and expenditure surpassing the numbers prior to the pandemic. While these numbers are essential, they only mean something if Bermudians feel the improvement. I'm pleased to report that this uptick in overall tourism activity also resulted in the sector's second consecutive year of growth, which added 339 jobs, bringing the total number of jobs to 3,636. This budget invests in our people to ensure they can achieve success. It is a budget that does not increase the tax burden on business and meets the Fiscal Responsibility Panel's target of delivering a $50 million budget surplus by fiscal year 26-27. Most importantly, this government has projected this outcome without any additional revenues which may accrue to the government due to the global minimum tax. The government will also be progressing our work on pension reform and tax reform, working alongside the Tax Reform Commission, and any measures that we intend to progress will be open to consultation, as has always been the case with this government. As we continue to manage the public purse prudently, we also remain focused on growing and diversifying our economy and enhancing Bermuda's value proposition. This government firmly believes that a thriving business environment is critical to the success of our economy, and that is why we will continue to execute the strategic priorities of our economic development strategy and improve conditions for businesses to set up, grow, and operate successfully. Our work thus far has led to success. Many global companies attract to our shores, 49 Bermudians on the path to home ownership because of the government's mortgage guarantee program, $440 million invested in our economy through the Economic Investment Certificate Program, new affordable housing units, and continued support for small and medium-sized businesses through the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation. But we are not taking a victory lap, because we know that not for every person and business in Bermuda feels the benefits of this work right now and still faces financial hardship. We recognize that there is still much more work to be done, and this government will continue to do the necessary work so our island and our people can return stability and prosperity. However, it is no doubt that this budget is a milestone, because with a delivery of a balanced budget, meaning that the government is no longer borrowing money, that means that in future years there'll be more space for investment in our infrastructure, investment in our people, investment in vital services, and also seeing lower interest rates for the government debt. Again, I'd like to thank the Ministry of Finance team, led by Acting Financial Secretary Ms. Cheryl Lister, and send special thanks to the Budget Office and the Director, Ms. Tina Tucker, for their outstanding work in putting this year's budget together. I want to thank MP Joshe Adams for his hard work and support in the budget statement, as well as the Department of Communications and all public officers who contributed to this collective work. With that, I'm happy to take questions from members of the media.
Very good, Clear. Thank you very much for your presentation. Jonathan, we'll open it up with you. Jonathan from the Royal Gazette. Jonathan Brown.
Afternoon, Sarah. Thanks for having us. My first question for you was, and there were a lot of very encouraging things in the budget, and obviously the balanced budget. It sounded, to me at least, heavier than usual on politics. Is it fair to ask if this was an election budget?
Well, the one thing I'll say, Jonathan, is that the opposition has branded this an election budget for 3 years in a row. And as I have said inside of my statement, the budget statement itself, somehow the opposition seems to confuse our views for reducing taxes for workers, for making sure that we reduce the burden of taxation for those persons in the economy who need it the most, as an election budget. But this is what we deliver year in and year out, and which we will continue to do. Do I agree that it was heavier on politics than normal? No, I do not, because I believe that it is important to make sure you draw a contrast. I thought it was remarkable that the opposition actually had the temerity to say that former Minister of Finance had predicted a balanced budget in 2019 and that was not delivered, without remembering the reason for that non-delivery was the debacle of Morgan's Point, which cost the taxpayer of this country over $200 million. So it is important that in a budget statement, which is a political document as well as a government document, that we set out where we stand. And I think it's important to note, if you look at other jurisdictions around the region, though I spoke for 2 hours, many other leaders in the Caribbean who deliver their budget statements speak for 4 hours or up to 6 hours, and the opposition is only given 24 hours to reply. So I hope with their week that they will make the best use of it and present actual solutions to the challenges that we have rather than platitudes of which we've been used to.
Okay. I'll move on. So we've got a wiggle room in there of, I believe, $710,000 to stay on track as a balanced budget. How confident are you, barring any contingencies, that we will be able to definitely deliver a balanced budget?
I'm incredibly confident that we'll be able to deliver this budget. I think, as you've seen, the example that I gave and the remarks that I just gave is that last year, February, we predicted that the 2022-23 budget deficit was going to be $77 million, and it came in at $28 million. We do exercise very strong budget control, some of those things that I highlighted at the Chamber of Commerce breakfast earlier today. I'm expecting that the $44 million projection, which is the best information we have right now, may also be narrowed as we move forward. And so I am incredibly confident that we will hit this particular target. We have seen growth in the economy. We know the revision of the new higher tax credit will lead to $30 million of additional revenue. And we are confident that with the continued improvements in tourism and other measures that we will see this balanced budget target achieved.
Thanks. Number 3 from me, and it's as much for my guidance as anything else. Is it fair to say that balancing this budget rests on the money that we borrowed back when the pandemic hit and it looked like we were going to have to need a lot more money, and it's come below what we expected it to?
Well, that would not be what balancing the budget would be, but I'll get to the point at which you're making. Certainly, the balancing the budget this year is because the government has managed to hold the line on expenditure as much as possible while boosting economic growth. If we look at what the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, who is an independent panel, said, and it's quoted inside the budget statement, they said that the government has largely held the line on expenses and growth has fed into budget deficit reduction. In regards to the question which you're asking about the money that was borrowed during the pandemic, yes, we had an economic recovery plan. That economic recovery plan said that we would borrow about $422 million over the time being. We have borrowed less, and what that excess borrowing has allowed us to do this year is, when faced with families and businesses who are going to be faced with an increased burden of health insurance rates, we have used those funds to buttress that so that the rates, the standard premium rate from the government of Bermuda, will not be going up. And it's a reminder that every health insurance plan in Bermuda, whether it's HIP, whether it's Future Care, whether it is the government insurance program, or whether it's the private sector insurers, of which you would be a part of with your employer, all have a portion of the standard premium rate. That rate will be frozen for the 3rd year in a row, which is a tangible demonstration that this government wants to make sure that the benefits of the collective sacrifice to get us to this balanced budget place, instead of that money just sitting in a bank, can be put to work for the Bermudian people to shield them from an increase in health insurance rates this year.
And that was very encouraging news. So it's a 1-year freeze on the standard health premium. Mm-hmm. How do we keep it that way and not, for want of a better term, kick the can down the road?
Well, I don't think it's a question of kicking the can down the road. I think what we have to recognize that in Bermuda, health insurance, just as globally, health insurance rates are a function of us living longer. The more longer we live, the more medical technology that exists, the more expensive healthcare becomes. And so that is the reason why it is vital that we focus on the matters of healthcare reform. You would see inside of the statement, we targeted a launch for the core benefits package of our new universal healthcare program to go live July 1st, 2025. And it's an important place that we're working towards. But healthcare is complex. But when we talk about health insurance is a function of utilization. Every time you go and get a test, that means that the health insurance funds have to pay for that test. That is where that's coming from. So health insurance inflation is not coming from the government. It is coming from utilization in the private sector. It is coming from utilization when we go to get those tests and those other things. And that's why it's so important on other measures that we focus on long-term health and well-being. The budget spoke to the fact that the government is rebooting the healthy living campaigns. It's vital that we have a healthier society, which reduces the amount of time that we need to access healthcare. It's also important that we have early intervention. So when we're talking about whether it's a mental health pathway, whether it's the first 1,000 days initiative, to make sure that we are taking care of healthcare needs when they arise versus whether they become urgent and more expensive.
Got it. So last one for me. I saw the road budget doubling to $5 million. I'm sure I heard Colonel Burt say that really to get the job done, we were looking at something in the region of 100 million over 10 years. Mm-hmm. So wasn't just 5 million was what we had to add to it? Could there not have been more, diverted elsewhere, given just simply that roads are something that we have been...
So let me answer that question in complete frank fashion. I could have easily said, and let's cut a few of these other numbers to put $10 million into the road budget to make a political statement. The fact is that we need to put what's in the budget, which is realistic to deliver. Right now, we are ramping up, purchasing a new asphalt plant, purchasing new equipment, dealing with training, and a reminder that the government has 500 less employees than we had 10 years ago. It is going to take a while to ramp up to that level. If that $5 million is spent, you bet and believe that we will find additional funds to divert from other places because we believe that the priority is roadworks. But it's also important that as we are debating the budget, that we put realistic numbers forward to the House. This is a doubling of our investment, more than a doubling of our investment in roadworks for this year. In addition, this year's money is going to be used to purchase the new plant and equipment to ensure that we can go ahead and get those items in place so we can hit the road running in the next fiscal year. And so that's my answer to that. I accept that people will say that it's not enough, but it is realistic to the amount that we plan to be able to do. But if there is more able to be done, I can promise you that we will find spaces to redirect those funds to that because we feel that it is particularly important. In the exact same way that we found funds to divert from other spaces to make additional investments in affordable housing 3 years ago because we felt that was a vital commitment to make as well, and we've seen the results of that. So this government has shown that it will be flexible, and if that money is used, you bet and believe that we will allocate more funds towards that. And I'm sure that the Minister of Public Works will echo that in his comments when he gives his press conference.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. We appreciate all of your queries. Cooper, did you have any questions?
I do. I like your tie today, sir.
Thank you very much. I figured that I did green on Friday, so I could go with, Bermuda pink and blue today.
It's looking good on you.
Thank you.
Simple questions out of the way first. Is there a reason that we weren't given an advanced copy of the budget this year? Usually we get one just ahead of the budget statement being read.
I wouldn't go so far as say there wasn't any particular reason. What we have had, though, is that these statements that have been sent out have somehow inadvertently leaked and gone out, so we just needed to protect it.
Okay, that's good to hear. Government's transferring $40 million from the excess borrowing fund to keep health insurance rates from rising, and $10 million of that to accelerate provision for affordable housing. Can you just help us understand what the excess borrowing fund is? Is it related to the sinking fund? Can we find that fund in the budget?
Okay, I'm happy to explain that. And just to clarify the numbers, it's $30 million for health insurance and $10 million for housing. Just to make sure, because I've seen some people say 50 and no, it's 40 in total. So the sinking fund was established as the government borrowing sinking fund that exists. In 2013, former Minister of Finance Bob Richards, when he went to the market to borrow the $800 million that was supposed to carry through the entire term of the OBA's term in office, and we know that it expired after 3 years, they had to go back to the market, but there was an amendment that was made to, getting very technical here now, the Government Loans Act. The Government Loans Act is the act that sets up the sinking fund. the sinking fund is technically now divided into two different baskets. There's the regular sinking fund, the traditional sinking fund that exists. And then there is the excess borrowing portion of the sinking fund, which came forward from that 2013 amendment. So if what the government used to do was borrow money from year to year and every year, and it was thought that it would be more efficient and better to borrow larger sums of money over the longer term with a larger offering, you can get lower rates, better competitive pricing, attract more institutional investors. And so it was decided at that time, supported by borrowings of which we have done, such as our former Minister of Finance did during the pandemic, that you borrow for what you think you'll need over a time horizon. We had our economic recovery plan. Our economic recovery plan said that they will estimate that we'll need this amount of money during the time to carry us over through the pandemic. That money is borrowed, but that money goes into the excess borrowing fund because the sinking fund is divided into two portions. In the excess borrowing fund itself, underneath law, excess borrowing funds can only be used for two purposes currently: to cover deficits, of which we are not expecting any deficits, or those funds are invested to make sure that you can have them when you need to pay the deficits. Unlike the traditional portion of the sinking fund, where those funds can be used to retire long-term debt. So it's important to note that we have to make sure that we follow the law. The Accountant General makes sure that we follow the law insofar as these particular funds. And so that's why I speak about the excess borrowing fund. There is a distinction inside of the sinking fund where there are funds that were borrowed to cover future deficits, in this case which we're using. As I said, we are not expecting significant future deficits. And so those funds can only be used to cover future deficits or to be invested for the use of future deficits. But given that we are not predicting any future deficits, we thought that it right and prudent to find a way to put that money to use. And given the fact that the country has sacrificed, workers and businesses have sacrificed in order for us to make ourselves and get ourselves to a place of a balanced budget. As I said in the statement, we want to share the benefits of collective sacrifice and to go ahead and use those. So even if you look at where we were from last year, we were in a $49 million position, better than we were last year. Yes, these are funds that were borrowed to carry us over through the pandemic, but we believe that it is a good use of those funds to shield Bermudians and employers from an increase of $540 a year in their health insurance costs.
So is this an expense or a transfer?
It's transfer.
Right, gotcha. And so it's not robbing Peter to pay Paul?
It is not an expense, as some misinformed persons may say on Twitter, such as the Shadow Minister of Finance, who decided to say something. It is not an expense, because if it was an expense, because remember, health insurance funds aren't expenses of the government. They are what everyone pays in as their premiums, and it goes to the mutual reinsurance fund. We are making a transfer from these excess borrowing funds to the mutual reinsurance fund in that particular case and instance. This is not a traditional and regular government expense, no.
Our government's employer portion of health insurance of GEHI payments fully paid and up to date?
I believe so. They have to be paid. That's why we said there's an additional allocation inside of the overheads line inside the budget. So absolutely, those things are paid on a regular basis. We increase that this year due to the fact that we are expecting a little bit more hiring to fill those hard-to-fill posts, which we've spoken about, but also we have to pay increased pension benefits due to the fact of union pay awards.
Moving on, there's an estimated 24.2 million increase in salaries for 2024-25, 4.8 million increase in wages. Why is a 29 million increase in government salaries wages estimated for the year?
Because of union agreements that took place last year. I'm not entirely certain if those numbers are accurate, as those numbers have been provided, because I think as a statement, the budget statement, that the increase in salaries is about 20 million, so that might be a misreading between revised and estimates. But either way, in the budget statement, we had union agreements. Last year, we said that the only provision for increases in our current account expenditure would be for union agreements. There was a union agreement that was made with all of the major unions that did see an increase that resulted in a $20 million increase to the government's pay, benefits, and overheads bill, and that's reflected inside of the increase in year's current account spending from last year's spending of $972 to this year at $992. Million.
Restitutions and social services have played a significant role in a revised $12.5 million increase in estimated CA expenditures last year. Since those are expenses that can happen sort of on the fly, how will you stick to this year's estimates for those areas?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Grants and contributions and professional services have played a significant role in a revised $12.5 million increase in estimated CA expenditures last year. Since those are expenses that can happen on the fly, how will you stick to this year's estimates for those areas?
Well, I think that the increase in grants is attributed plain and simply to the additional grant that was given to the Bermuda Hospitals Board. If you take the Bermuda Hospitals Board at $60 million and extract the difference which you made, I think you would see that we've actually come down on that figure rather than up. And so going forward, we're not expecting a special grant to the hospital this year. We've paid back the funds that were technically owed by the government over time. And so I don't think that's going to be a particular challenge. I know that people also want to focus on professional services, and I think that line item is scheduled to go down this year as well.
To Jay Adams, you thanked him in your speech there, grooming him for your position for a later date?
Well, I'm not going to speak about what the future may hold in regards to politics, but I'm grateful for the work of MP Adams. He's not only assisted myself as Minister of Finance, he also assisted the former Minister of Finance. He's an integral part of the Ministry of Finance team, and he's been responsible for the delivery of a number of government initiatives. The Mortgage Guarantee Program was his initiative that he took from beginning to completion, and it's seen 49 Bermudians on the path to home ownership, and also expanding those particular proposals to include more persons who can take advantage. And I think we need to have a competitive banking environment in Bermuda. And one of the things that I highlighted inside the budget speech, which I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity, is to say that not all banks in Bermuda have increased their mortgage rates. The government last year eliminated stamp duty on mortgage transfers. That means if you can get a better rate for your mortgage at a different bank, you have the power to move it without paying any tax to the government. And we know that persons have taken advantage of that and have saved themselves thousands of dollars on their mortgage repayments.
Last question. Government intends to commit a very big number, $112.3 million to capital projects. However, when actual figures come in 2 years later, capital expenditure spending is often in an area where government spends less than planned. How will you keep to this commitment to capital spending while maintaining a surplus?
Well, that is a great question. And so if we hit the number, then we will still have a budget surplus. But one of the things of which I had mentioned is the government has about 500 or 600 less people employed in it than we did back 10 years ago. And it's important that we look to ramp up in certain areas. One of the areas of which I have spoken about is the space of engineers. And engineers, the people who serve as project managers who work on these particular items. Unfortunately, the government hires these people out of school, they get their training, their certifications, they're lured to the private sector for significantly higher salaries. We have a number of people who have come on, a number of young people who have come on, who are pushing and advancing projects, and we have to make sure that we increase the capacity in order to deliver. I think the Minister of Public Works is well aware of the need to go ahead. We have seen capital account expenditure increase this year, so we have been able to spend more of the funds, and we're going to continue to make sure that we do that. But part of this challenge as well about the not spending those funds has been due to supply chain challenges as well, the difficulty in long-time sourcing. Some of those things are easing, and also there's a need to make sure we invest in equipment because it's difficult to do certain things if the equipment keeps breaking down, and that is the reason why we're investing in new equipment to make sure that we can better deliver what we said we are set out to do.
Thank you very much, Cooper. Thank you very much. Jonathan, Cooper, do you have any closing words?
The only closing words that I will say is that certainly we're going to make sure that this information on the budget is spread widely. As we've done every previous year, there will be a mailer to all households, which will demonstrate what this budget does mean to citizens. There's also a QR code on the back of that mailer, which you can scan to get more information about the budget. We look forward to engaging. There will be a number of press conferences from ministers where members of the media will be able to ask further questions on this, and we look forward to debating this budget in the House. This is a budget that invests in our people, invests in our future. It is one that recognizes the sacrifices of the Bermudian public in reaching a balanced budget and is sharing the benefits of those collective sacrifices with the people of this country by making sure that government health insurance premiums do not increase this year, saving families $540 a year. I'm grateful for all the work and all the sacrifice, and rest assured that the government recognizes that there's more work to be done and will continue to do that work so the benefits of a growing economy are felt by all persons who live here. Thank you and have a wonderful day.